Before we get into today's game, I want to talk about the sponsors for my channel. Card Conduit is the best way to sell your unused Magic cards. Whether you've got a box of unsorted bulk, or a complete and alphabetized set, there's a great option for everyone. With a payout averaging 19% better than using any one buy list, and that's after fees are applied, you can rest assured you'll get the best bang for your buck. And if you use the affiliate link in the description below, or the promo code MTGMUDSTA, you'll save 10% off their fees. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. And if you use the promo code MTGMUDSTA, your first purchase of MTG sealed and singles will be 5% off. And Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest deck. So be sure to use the code MUDSTA or the affiliate link down below to save 5% on your next order. Today's patron shoutout goes to Amy. Thank you, Amy, for your continued support through Patreon. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game finds Arja, Max, John, and Mathieu battling it out. In today's game, Mathieu is playing his Liliana Heretical healer deck, keeping Jet Medallion, Starscream Power Hungry, Grave Scrabbler, Liliana Vess, Rings of Brighthearth, and 2 Swamps. John is playing his Kykar deck, keeping 2 Islands, Mountain, Shattering Pulse, Terramorphic Expanse, Capsize, and Sunbaked Canyon. Arja is teaming up Wernog and Sophina to get a clue, and he keeps Temple of Triumph, Swamp, Cranial Plating, Academy Manufactor, Seize the Spoils, Crime Novelist, and a Scrapwork Mutt. Last but not least, Max is playing the Capitoline Triad, keeping Walking Ballista, Invasion of Ravnica, Skittering Cicada, Treasure Keeper, Arcane Lighthouse, Scavenger Grounds, and Ruins of Oran Reef. Arja wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws, plays a tapped Temple of Triumph, and scries 1. Max follows his example, playing a tapped Ruins of Oran Reef, and passes. John doesn't have a tap land, but playing and cracking his Terramorphic Expanse goes to find him a tap basic, and he does so, and passes. Mathieu draws, and isn't a sheep, playing a swamp, and passes. Arja's got a swamp for turn, and he casts Wernog. Max takes him up on the offer, making a clue token as well, while everyone else declines and loses 1, with Arja making 2 clues. Max draws, plays a Tectonic Edge, and passes. John's got a Frostboil Snarl for turn, revealing an island so it comes in untapped. Mathieu plays a Swamp, and pays 2 for a Jet Medallion. Arja's turn has him playing a Talisman of Hierarchy, and he then goes to combat. He swings Wernog at John, dealing 1, and passes. During his end step, Max cracks his clue token to draw a card. Max draws and plays a Hostile Desert, and then taps 1 for a Soul Ring and passes turn. John draws, plays an island, and passes. Mathieu's turn has him playing a Swamp, and he casts Starscream as its vehicle side. Going to combat, Mathieu swings Starscream at Max, giving him the Monarchy as he takes the hit. He then passes turn. Arja's turn has him casting a Thorough Investigation in his main phase, and going to combat, he swings Wernog at Max to try and steal the Monarchy. Before moving to blocks, Max flashes in a Skittering Cicada and gives it a +1/+1 counter by tapping the Ruins of Oran Reef. Wernog then dies, but no one takes a clue token from his leaving the battlefield trigger, and Arja just passes after that. Max draws, plays a Buried Ruin, and then passes, drawing from being the Monarch. John's turn has a Reliquary Tower coming in, and he pays 4 mana for Jace's Sanctum. Mathieu draws, and goes to combat. He swings Starscream at Max, this time taking the Monarchy rather than giving it, as Max takes 2. Starscream then transforms, and in his post-combat main phase, Mathieu plays a Witch's Cottage, but has no targets. He then casts his Commander. Mathieu then moves to his end step, drawing from being the Monarch, and unfortunately we forget, but we do catch it after, that he deals 2 to Arja with Starscream's ability. Arja's turn has him casting Seize the Spoils, discarding a Scrapwork Mutt. He doesn't hit a land, but does make a treasure at least, and just passes turn. During Arja's end step, Max flashes out a Burnished Heart, and once it's out, activates his ability, sacrificing it to go and find 2 basic wastes. Max draws, and plays an Arcane Lighthouse, and then goes straight to combat. He swings the Cicada at Matt, and Matt responds by casting Doomblade to take it out. In his post-combat main phase, Max then casts a Scarecrow. followed by a Treasure Keeper. And he then activates the Ruins of Oran Reef to put a +1/+1 counter onto the Treasure Keeper. With nothing else, Max passes. John draws, plays a mountain, and casts his commander, passing after that. Mathieu draws and deals 2 to Max with Scarstream's ability. He then casts an expedition map and cracks it, going to find Cabal coffers, which he plays for turn. Going to his end step, he draws from being the Monarch and once more deals 2 to Max thanks to Starscream. Arja draws and casts a Crime Novelist. He then sacrifices a treasure token, making an additional mana because of the Crime Novelist. He uses that mana to crack a clue, drawing a card, but doesn't find a land. He does get another red off the Crime Novelist though, which he uses to cast Tyrion's Soulcleaver. He also enters into the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and with nothing else, passes. Max draws and plays a Scavenger Grounds and goes to combat. He swings the Treasure Keeper at Mathieu, and Mathieu double blocks the Liliana and Starscream. Max kills Starscream and lets Liliana flip, and with the Treasure Keeper dying, Max reveals Omorthus, which enters but has no counters and dies immediately. Max then casts an Eye of Osier attack and crafts it, exiling an artifact and a creature card. With nothing else, he passes. John draws and casts a Font of Magic, and then goes to combat. He swings Kykar at Matt for 3, hitting him and becoming the Monarch. He then moves to his end step, drawing a card from the Monarchy as he passes turn. Mathieu draws and plays a Swamp. He then upticks Liliana, making everyone discard a card. And Mathieu discards a Grave Scrabbler, paying the Madness cost to cast it. With it coming in, he returns Starscream, and he then casts it as its vehicle side once more. Going to combat, Matt swings Starscream at John to reclaim the Monarchy and succeeds, flipping it to the front. Mathieu then draws from the Monarch as he moves to his end step, and he pings Arja for 2 with Starscream's ability again, and he passes after that. Arja draws and finally finds a land, playing a mountain for turn, and he then casts his Academy Manufactor. Going to combat, he swings the Crime Novelist at Matt, and with the Thorough Investigation trigger on the stack, John casts a Shattering Pulse with buyback, destroying the Manufactor. This has Arja only getting a clue token, and Mathieu then chumps with a zombie. After that, Arja passes, and during his end step, Max activates Tectonic Edge to destroy the Cabal coffers. And responding to this, John casts his Shattering Pulse again, but without buyback this time, and he destroys the Apex Observatory. Max draws and casts Ugin the Spirit Dragon, down-ticking it for 4 to wipe the board. Max then swings the Scarecrow at Mathieu, taking the Monarchy, and then moves to his end step, drawing a card. John draws, plays a Port Town, and reveals a plane so it comes in untapped. Mathieu's turn has him playing a Swamp, and he pays enough for a Liliana Vess. He then down-ticks her when she's out to tutor for a card to put on top, and he passes while searching. Arja just draws, casts Sophina, and passes after she resolves. Max's turn has him drawing and playing a Drownyard Temple, and he then upticks Ugin to finish off Liliana Vess. He then casts a Mind's Eye and passes. During his end step, John casts Capsize with buyback, and he bounces the Mind's Eye back to Max's hand. John draws and plays a Plains, and he passes after that. Mathieu draws and plays a Swamp, and casts the card that I've seen him cast the most with a Demon Lord Belzenlock. He gets a Twilight Prophet and a Ripples of Undeath, taking 2 from it. Mathieu then casts the Ripples and follows up with a Scheming Symmetry, and he targets Arja with it. This lets them each tutor for a card to the top, and Mathieu then passes. During his end step, John casts Capsize with buyback and targets Arja's Temple of Triumph, and we move to his turn. Arja draws and casts Tyrion's Journal, and then taps it, sacrificing a clue and drawing again. He then replays the Temple of Triumph, scrying 1, and then casts a Soul Ring. He goes to combat and swings Sophina at Ugin. This makes him a clue token when she attacks, and Ugin then takes 4. Arja then passes turn, and during his end step, Max reanimates the Treasure Keeper by tapping the Scarecrow on his end step. Max's turn is quite quick, as he draws and recasts Mind's Eye. John draws, and Max pays the 1 to draw with him thanks to Mind's Eye. John then plays a Fury Column Snarl, and then recasts Kykar and passes. Matcha draws and then mills 3, and pays 1 and 3 life to get a swamp from the milled cards. He then plays the swamp, and he goes to combat. He swings Bells and Lock at Ugin to finally take it off the board, and after combat, Matcha then casts a Twilight Prophet and passes. Arja's turn has him playing a Mayhem Devil, and he then cracks a clue with the Tarian's Journal to draw a card and deals a damage to the Scarecrow thanks to the Devil, and Max pays the 1 to draw with him. He then cracks a clue with mana to draw a card, and he kills the Scarecrow this time around with the Mayhem Devil trigger, and once more, Max pays 1 and draws another card with him. Arja then swings Sophina at Max, and he can't block and takes 4. Arja also gets to make another clue token, and as he's taken the Monarchy, gets to draw during his end step. Max draws and plays an Urza's Power Plant, and he then casts Ugin's Mastery. He follows it up with the Capitoline Triad, which manifests a card thanks to Ugin's Mastery. Max then follows up with Altar of Dementia, and he passes turn. John draws and plays a Needle Verge Pathway. He then casts a Murmuring Mystic, and Arja responds to this, casting a Swords to Plowshares to target Kykar. John responds to this with a Reiterate with Buyback, and he copies the swords and exiles Bells and Lock. Kykar also makes a Spirit token, and Arja's sword then resolves, with Kykar getting exiled and John gaining some life as well. The Mystic then resolves, and John passes turn. Matcha reveals Reanimate from the Twilight Prophet, draining the table and draws her turn. He then mills 3 from the Ripples, one of which is an Arcana Revenant, which he pays a mana and 3 life to put back to hand. Matcha then casts the Revenant, and he goes to combat. He swings the Twilight Prophet at Arja, reclaiming the Monarchy, as Arja takes the hit. After that, Matcha draws from being the Monarch and passes. Arja draws and casts a Reckless Fireweaver, and then plays a Disciple of the Vault. He then strikes a deal with Mathieu to hit him with the Mayhem Devil instead of Sophina, and he goes to combat. Arja swings Sophina at John, and the Devil at Mathieu, creating 2 clue tokens. This has each of Arja's opponents taking 2 from the Fireweaver. And John double blocks, with Arja assigning the damage to the Mystic. Arja then cracks a clue with Tarian's Journal, pinging the Mystic to deal a damage, deals 1 damage to John with a Disciple of the Bolus, and then draws a card. Arja follows up with Dark Ritual, and then uses that mana to cast Read the Bones, scrying 2, losing 2, and drawing 2. He then plays a Swamp for turn, and Arja cracks another clue token, pinging John's Spirit token, and dealing 1 to Max with a Disciple trigger. He then moves to his end step, drawing from being the Monarch, and passing. Max's turn has him playing a Zalfrin Void, and he gets to scry 1. He then casts Ugin the Ineffable, and down takes the Walker to destroy the Mayhem Devil. Max then follows up with the Hedron Archive, and sacrifices the Treasure Keeper to Altar of Dementia to mill 3. Max gets his On Death trigger from the Keeper, and hits an Unstable Obelisk, and then mills his cards. Going to combat, Max swings both creatures at Arja, and Arja blocks the Manifest with a Reckless Fireweaver, but takes the hit from the Triad. Max then sacrifices the Manifest to mill himself for 2, and then sacrifices the Triad to mill himself for 7. He then recasts the Triad for free, and manifests, and then sacrifices the Triad again to mill himself for another 7. He's once more able to recast the Triad for free again, doing so, and manifesting again, and then passing to John. John draws and recasts Kykar, and passes to Matt. Mathieu reveals a Swamp from the Twilight Prophet trigger, then draws, and mills 3 to Ripples. He gets back Liliana Dreadhorde General with the Ripples, paying the 1 and 3 life. In his main phase, he then plays a Swamp and casts the Liliana. He upticks her to make a zombie token, and he then casts Gix and goes to combat. He swings the Twilight Prophet at Max, and Max takes the hit for 2, regaining the Monarch. After that, Mechia draws from being the Monarch during his end step, which Max pays the 1 to draw off of thanks to his Mind's Eye. Arja draws, and Max draws with him after paying for the Mind's Eye trigger. Arja then plays a Plains, and he goes to combat. Before attackers are declared though, Mechia casts a Liliana's Triumph, and each opponent sacrifices a creature and discards a card. Arja then swings the Reckless Fireweaver and Sophina at John for 5, creating 2 more clue tokens, which deals 2 to everyone. John then takes the 5, and Arja gets to draw 2 and lose 2 thanks to Gix triggers. After that, Arja casts a Marionette Apprentice, making a Servo token from the Fabricate, and dealing 1 to everyone thanks to the Fireweaver trigger. He then plays Braids Arisen Nightmare. Arja then sacrifices a clue token to Tyrion's Journal, and deals 1 to everyone, and Max pays 1 to draw off it with him. With that done, Arja passes, and he sacrifices a clue token to Braids, and all of his opponents decide to take 2 rather than sacrifice something, so Arja draws 3 cards. And before leaving the end step, Max exiles 30 mana value worth of cards from his graveyard to make the emblem from the Capitoline Triad. Max draws and plays a Sanctum of Ugin. And he then casts a Duplicant, targeting the Marionette Apprentice. Arja sacrifices a clue in response, dealing 1 to each opponent thanks to the Apprentice, and the Apprentice then gets exiled. Max then encores a Phyrexian Triniform, and he moves to combat. He swings what he can at Liliana, and an encored Triniform at each opponent. Mechia blocks everything while John and Arja just take the hit for 9. After combat, Max sacrifices his Triniforms and Golems, milling Mechia out. He then upticks Ugin to make a Spirit token. Max then passes, and during his end step, Matt casts a Thrilling Encore to bring back his jumping creatures and anything else that died that turn. John draws, but has no plays and just has to pass. Mechia goes to his turn and discards his hand to Gix on his upkeep, targeting John. However, Mechia doesn't draw a Time Twister effect unfortunately to save himself, so he just casts Whispers of the Muse with buyback to take himself out. With that on the stack, John casts Reiterate with buyback, and Mechia then loses the game as he's unable to draw. Arja draws and plays a Dragon Skull Summit, and he then goes to combat. He swings out at John, and with the effects to make clue tokens on the stack, John casts Capsize but without buyback, and targets the Reckless Fireweaver. The Weaver is bounced, and John then takes 8, and in his post-combat main phase, Arja then plays a Rakdos Signet. He then casts a Monumental Corruption, and targets Max to deal 11 to him and make him draw 11. And then casts a Lightning Bolt, and targets Max. Max isn't going out with a fight though, sacrificing his board in response to mill Arja for 90 in retaliation, and Max then dies to Lightning Bolt, and Arja now has an empty library. Unfortunately, he's forgotten that he is also the Monarch, and as Arja moves to his end step, he fails to draw, and for the second time this year, a player loses to being the Monarch at their end step. Game review time. Considering that this game is as long as it is, you'll be surprised to know that it was only about an hour and 15 minutes. There was just a lot jammed into that time frame, which was really cool to see. In terms of commanders, the Capitoline Triad, I'm glad that Max was able to get the emblem from it because it seemed like that's one of the big pushes for why you play that commander. And honestly, when he cast Altar of Dementia and then just did nothing with it until that very last phase, I was really surprised. Typically, people do degenerate things with Altar of Dementia. It's not usually a fun time for people. And I actually really liked how Max used it in the deck. It felt like there's a lot of build-up. There's a lot of ways that he had to sort of jump through hoops to get to the point where he did. And when he did, the payoff was awesome. Unfortunately, the payoff for Arja's Wernog and Sophina deck was very slow. I think he just was so far behind in lands, and even with like a little bit of treasures that he was getting, he just really wasn't able to establish himself until late game. Although when he did though, with the Reckless Fireweaver and the Disciple and the Marionette Apprentice, that was, I mean, the damage added up really quickly with those kind of things on the field, so that was kind of cool. Mechia's Liliana Heretical Healer deck kind of was the balance for most of the game. I found like he had a lot of answers and responses which helped deal with other people's problematic cards, and he did a pretty good job of being like the middleman in terms of what he was doing until Max decided to just take him out. John, I mean, even John admitted at the end of the game he didn't deserve to win it. He did absolutely nothing except for capsize some lands and blow up some artifacts, which sometimes you are in the position where you just win like that. And it's really funny that in the span of 2 months between the game where Neo lost because of the monarchy and Arja lost from the monarchy, I'd never seen this happen before. I've seen Mildex, I've seen the monarchy in games, I've just never seen them interact in such a way where it causes someone to deck out, which is really, really funny. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.